In this next example, what we're going to do is we're going to call another script, and we're going to keep doing that script as long as something is true. And that is where we have the v count is less than the v record count, which is the total record count of that file. Then once we are in that other, in this case standard dev underscore sub script, while we're in there, we're going to basically loop around over and over again. We're going to group over and over again until something is not true. And in this case, we're basically saying until a certain number or person, in this case a vendor or enterer initials, is going to be the same. And when it changes, then we're going to change and go back to that main script. So it's going to make a lot more sense in ACL, but I wanted to show you the two main statements up front that are driving this script before we talk through how we're going to calculate a standard deviation by vendor or enterer of that information. Now that we're in ACL, I think it's best to start taking a look at the results and why a lot of times I give the scripts out so that people can run them like we did here and then look at the results and say, okay, how are we going to get to those results? So currently we have a paid file, and in this case we have an enterer initials and check amount, and I almost want to just take all these other fields and delete them because they're pretty much not really that useful. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort on that enterer initial, and for each one I'm going to calculate. So if we took this particular one and filtered to it, I'm going to calculate a standard deviation and an average. But let me just redo that. I'm going to go to my dialog box by editing the command. The command line, for those of you that don't know, you go to Window Command Line. And when I'm here, I select the standard deviation checkbox, and then I will get not only my stats, 638.63, but also the standard deviation for that person, FS. And if I go to my standard deviation results now, FS, we have a average value. Actually, I must have goofed here. We do have the standard deviation of 1166. But I think I was looking at the total value, so let's take a look at that. The average value, ACL is correct, is 3548, and standard deviation of 11.66. So those values are here, and that's kind of interesting, right? That we were able to take a payment file here and calculate for that given person, FS, a average value and a standard deviation. Then we do the same thing for JC and JL and etc. But let's go back to that standard deviation main script now. And what we have is a main script and a subscript. So the main script, as we now walk into it a little bit further, I'm just going to run that script just to show you. We're going to select the payment file or paid file. We're going to select the field to calculate on, which is the enterer's initial, and then the numeric value, which is check amount. Hit OK. Enter, go to the standard deviation results, and there we are again. So let's go back to that main. The main is going to call the subscript, as we'll find in a second. So up here, we're basically just selecting the information. Now, as I did, I sorted the file on that enter initial field. So if you look in this dialog, you'll notice that the enterer initial is called VID number. By sorting on that field, I then get to a file called sorted. And the reason I have to sort on that field, you'll see in a second, is we're going to count through that file one by one and determine whether or not we need to go back to the main script, and this will make more sense in a few seconds. Now, whenever you sort a file, it will create a variable, and again, variables are stored here on the Edit Variables section, of write1. Write1 is the number of records that you have in that particular table. In this case, it's 729, which is right here. We're also going to set the vCount variable equal to 1. So that's going to set up a 729 for vRecord count, v count equals 1. Then what we're going to do is we're going to complete, and this is the key one, right, as we said, we're going to complete the standard deviation subscript over here while the v count 1 is less than or equal to the v record count, which is 729. So at this point, the script will continue to go through the v subscript until v count 1 equals v count 729. All of this stuff down here, not that it's that much, this will not be looked at until v count equals v record count. So let me just kind of click that down. So we basically push pin it down, and we're going to select this standard deviation subscript now. First thing this is going to do now in the sorted file. So again, we have the sorted file open in this particular case. Notice we've opened up the sorted file back here. I'm going to start with record number 1. So we'll just imagine here that this is sorted. We're going to start with record number 1, and let's see what we do. We're going to then say that the VID number, 2 in this case, so the variable, is going to equal whatever field we've selected. So in this case, what it's going to do is it's going to say that the VID number 2 is equivalent to FS. Then deletes this temp file just so that we can start writing to it. And then we're going to now group. And we're going to group while this VID number equals this other VID number, which again is FS. So we're going to extract the record. So it's going to go through record by record, each one of these, as long as the VID number 2 equals FS. And as it does, it's just going to keep going and going. When it does not equal FS, it's going to end. So, it keeps going. Just imagine what it's doing. It's keeping on going here, keeping on going. And then when it hits this point, it's now going to go to JC. At the point of JC, I now have a temp file that is equal to all of the FS items only. So let's run this script again, but I'm going to break it right at that point, just so that we can see, and you could almost type anything in there, but I'm just typing the word break. We're going to run the standard deviation main file again, select the paid file, select the enterer's initials and the check amount field, and it goes through and it breaks at that point. So let's take a look. The temp file now has all of the FS items like we talked about. Let's take a look at our variables though, because this is where it gets a little interesting. We now have a write to, in this case, of 18. The write to, in this case, was what was extracted in this particular group here. So as it wrote all those items, again, write 1 was equal to the 729 because that's what was sorted on. Write 2 in this case is going to be equal to 18. So now let me just get rid of that break. Now we're going to then say, okay, v count equals v count, which was 1, plus write 2, which is 18 in this case. So now it's sort of resetting what v count is, equivalent to 1 plus 18 or 19. So let's go back now, all over the place here, but let's go back to the sorted file and to row 19, which is where JC starts. So now row 19 is JC, and that's where JC starts. So we're now kind of resetting this. We're opening up the temp file, which had all the FS's in it, run the statistics with the standard deviation. That's what that STD does. Then we extract the fields, and in this case I'm just extracting the key fields. I have the enterer's initial, the standard deviation 1 variable, which would be calculated up here as something called standard deviation, average 1, which is the average, as the average value to a new file called standard deviation results, which we're appending. So by completing that exercise, we're able to, at this point, right around here, we have not only the temp file deleted, we have the sorted file open, and we have the temp file deleted, which had all the FS's in it. And our v count is now 19. Okay, so keep that in the back of your mind. And then we're going to go back to the main subfile, and it's again going to say vCount, so it goes back to this point in the script and says vCount 19 is less than the vRecord count 729. Okay, shoot me back to standard deviation sub, and we start over again. Locate record vCount, which is now 19. What is the ID number? The ID number 2 will be equal to ID number, which is JC at that point, and it goes through that same process, and it's going to count through all of the JCs, and then when that's done, it's going to end at the JLs, which would be at row 124. So then it's going to write basically here from 19 to 124, which is about 105 records. That's what write 2 would be, 105, and we'll have vCount equals 19 plus 105, which equals the 124, and then it kind of continues down the trend there. So again, a lot going on here, little complicated in the fact that you're doing a do script while function here using the record counting, and that's more for the entire table. But then when you're kind of in a sub format here, we're then working through the locating record vCount, which in this case is either the 19 or the 124, depending on which one we're looking at, and then doing a bunch of calculations before kind of sending you back to that original script. So a little complicated, but as you break it down like we did here, it's not that bad and does make a lot of sense. So let's run this one more time now that we know what we're doing here. And I'm just going to select the paid file. We'll select the enterer's initials, the check amount, hit OK, and go back to that standard deviation results. Again, this was calculated on rows, say 1 to 18. This is rows, 19 to 123. This is rows 123 to whatever it was, etc., etc. And then that gives you not only a standard deviation by enterer, but of the average value. You could now run this, if you'd like, one more time. Say, you could do it on anything. You could do it on journal entry, or in this case I'm going to select the vendor number in this case just to keep it pretty simple. Check them out. Again, a few more vendors, so it takes a little bit more time to run, but now that I go to the standard deviation results, again, now we have every vendor number, which is 32, with the standard deviation and the average value of each vendor calculated. This is a great file, great reference file that you could use to join back, let's say on vendor number or enter initial, back to your original table, the paid file, so that you could start to say, well, I want to extract things that are greater than a certain average value or a certain average value plus 2 standard deviations. These are all things that can be calculated once this table is joined back to this paid file here.